Hello, my name is Sabrina Gillow, and my library advocacy project is for the use of historical fiction and historical fiction graphic novels in the school library. If you think back to your time in school, I'm sure you can think of at least one historical fiction book that stuck with you. For me, it was To Kill a Mockingbird. We read several when I was in school, from April Morning about the American Revolution to the things they carried about Vietnam. But To Kill a Mockingbird has always stayed with me. One of the number one complaints I got from my students as a history teacher was that they didn't see the point in learning about something from so long ago that they couldn't connect to. Well, To Kill a Mockingbird made an impact on the way that I thought about the Jim Crow era. That's why I tell you this story. Historical fiction books engage students in history, make an impact by sharing perspectives, and make history real for students. It takes it from a dry lecture to something powerful. The goal of this program is to align and utilize historical fiction and historical fiction graphic novels to the 8th grade U.S. history curriculum, collaborate with history teachers to pair novels to their units. Our target audience to start this project with is our 8th grade U.S. history students, and our purpose is to increase student engagement in history, and our objective is to support student TEKS developments, particularly historical thinking skills in 8.29b, with identifying cause and effect relationships, comparing, contrasting, finding the main idea, summarizing, and drawing inferences and conclusions. 8.29d, identifying bias in POV, and 8.29f, evaluating the validity of a source. For this program, we will need to expand our historical fiction collection in order to align with the 8th grade U.S. history curriculum. We have some historical fiction books that can fit within a few units, but we would need several more in order to support that content area. For this program, I am requesting $1,000 to purchase new books. Some titles that I would include for this project are the Lit Links collection on Tidal Wave. This collection pairs a fiction book and a nonfiction book together so that students are able to compare the two. This gives students the opportunity to evaluate the novel they read and check it for historical accuracy using. Another example of the type of book I would order are graphic novels, the one that you see here. This graphic novel is a historical fiction narrative about a family's experience on the Oregon Trail, part of the U.S. history curriculum on westward expansion. Graphic novels provide visuals to aid with context and understanding and may go a long way with our reluctant readers and emergent bilingual populations. Finally, the books in this list will include as many topics from the curriculum that I can find. The last novel that you see here, The Journal of Sean Sullivan, is about the experience of a boy working on the Transcontinental Railroad, part of the Industrial Revolution unit. As you can see, with 3 different content topics laid out, Revolution, Westward Expansion, and Industrial Revolution, there is a variety of historical fiction available to meet the several centuries that the U.S. history curriculum covers. There are many benefits for 8th grade students. Students who read historical fiction novels experience increased comprehension of historical events, have the opportunity to practice identifying and understanding different perspectives, build background knowledge if the novel is read ahead of the unit, or develop contextualization if it is read with the unit, and most importantly, experience increased engagement. Historical fiction puts history in students' hands in a way that a textbook does not, gives them an experience. Certain sections of historical fiction text will provide new information relating to a historical topic, causing a student to slow down and make connections between what was taught in the classroom and what they hold in their hands. Schaefer, 2018 study about the historical fiction in classrooms. In Schaefer's 2018 study into the use of historical fiction and other methods used for social studies instruction that I just referenced, feedback from teachers that he surveyed indicated that using historical fiction makes a positive impact on student learning. 64% of teachers reported that students had higher engagement with historical fiction texts, 76% had increased interest, and 64% experienced increased comprehension. Overall, integrating historical fiction into social studies instruction proved beneficial for students because it made learning more enjoyable. Another study from 2022 shows that historical fiction graphic novels also provide positive impacts on student experiences when learning social studies content. Quintel and North put it best about their own study. This data shows that for every question, the short story was more positively received than the classroom material, which in this case was a textbook reading. Students were 1 point more likely to continue pursuing learning about World War I after reading the short story than the textbook. There was a 0.9 point increase in students who considered the topic important, and a 1.6 point increase in relatability to the topic. This data shows that students connect with history more when it's given to them as a narrative. McClanahan's 2022 study also shows that students involved in his survey made a genuine effort to utilize unique aspects of the graphic novel to comprehend the text and relate it to social studies. After using historical fiction graphic novels, students were actively using social studies skills and attempting to make connections on their own, illustrating increased engagement. Quenzel and North report on Question 8 about engagement that 70% of students found the historical fiction graphic novel very engaging, 23% listed it as just as engaging, and a mere 7% were neutral. There were no negative responses, suggesting that all students benefited from the format. How will we measure the impact on our own students? There are two ways to do this. The first is to use benchmark data from the last year when this program did not exist and compare it against this year once it has been implemented. We will be able to use this hard data to measure the impact that historical fiction incorporation has on student achievement on TEKS-based questions. Part of the reason we are choosing to use 8th grade is because they have a STAR test in this subject, so we have a bank of questions to use to evaluate the TEKS mentioned earlier. The other strategy to measure the impact of student learning is a student artifact in the form of a historical fiction authentication project. At the end of the unit, students compare the information they read in the novel to what they learned in class, and if time allows, supplement that knowledge with research to evaluate the historicity of the novel. I just want to talk a little bit more about the historical fiction authentication assignment. The best quote I could find to explain it comes from Eliot's 2022 abstract, where she says students analyzed a historical fiction picture book and conducted research about the time period and events presented. Students then compared their findings to those presented by the author to determine the authenticity of the book. What this means is that students are taking the information they learned in class and comparing it to what they read in the book, the perspectives and events they experienced, along with the characters, and evaluating them to determine if the information was historically accurate. First, this gives students ownership over their own learning. They are responsible for determining the accuracy of the information and making connections about how history is recorded. Students have agency about how they compare their experience and what they know with what they have learned. Students must draw conclusions, compare, contrast, and summarize, all parts of 8.29b. Students will also have to practice identifying bias and POV as they work to understand the way that the story is written and the factual information that they have learned. Bias and POV can help inform them of the choices that the author made when writing. This supports 8.29d. Finally, by evaluating the story and comparing it to authoritative sources, students are determining the validity using corroboration of sources, which is part of 8.29f. All of these TEKS I just mentioned were part of the objectives of this project. With this project, students will practice critical historical thinking skills. So in summary, by incorporating historical fiction reading into history classes, we will increase engagement because students enjoy the content more when they're able to connect with it. We'll increase comprehension because students will be able to understand the information better with a narrative and visual representation. Students will also enjoy continued learning because they're inspired to continue learning about the topic when they enjoy it and have higher comprehension. And this project will also employ skills practice. Historic authentication allows students to apply historical thinking skills to their learning. For my references, we have Eliot's Historical Fiction Authentication article. We have McCallaghan's study about his experiencing historical fiction graphic novels to teach social studies. We have Quenzel and North's study regarding reading history from a different perspective, making students care for history by creating historical fiction short story with an anthropomorphic narrator. And we have Schaefer's study, engagement in a social studies classroom, an examination into what methods and resources middle school teachers use with their students. Thank you for listening. I hope you will consider this project.